Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Peacock, and welcome to Excellent Thought, where we examine issues of faith, policy, and culture, often at the same time. My guest today is Rory Wilson. Rory is a graduate student at Yale who attended Columbia University as undergrad. He is from Moscow, Idaho, and it's what happened to him and his brother in Moscow back in 2020 when he was still in high school is the reason that he now has a petition pending before the United States Supreme Court. Welcome, Rory. Thanks for joining me on Excellent Thought.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Good. Well, Rory, we're going to get into some of the background about you and some of the issues that you've dealt with, including the Supreme Court issue as we go through it. But really, I'd just like to get us started by, if you could tell us what happened in Moscow to you and your younger brother, Seamus, that has come to be known as StickerGate.
Man, it's a little bit ago at this point. COVID obviously shut everything down. Idaho was quick to open things back up, apart from my town, really, and a couple other places in the state. COVID levels were quite low, but they really wanted to keep some pretty strict measures that were really making things difficult for local businesses. And so there were quite a number of protests locally, especially there were people going to the city hall to ask them to change their policies. And in the face of the city council refusing to change or loosen any of their regulations, there was a protest in front of City Hall. And the police arrived and arrested 3 people for singing hymns outside of the City Hall. So
yeah, so you said it was a protest, and in one sense it was, but it was really a bunch of Christians getting together and singing hymns was the basic thing, right?
Yeah, it was definitely the purpose was a demonstration of protest, but in a very peaceful way that would be inoffensive. So you have a number of people from different churches, many of whom were from my church, who were there. And it was in the aftermath of those arrests, and then also myself being threatened with arrest just for walking outside talking to my cousin without a mask on, that I decided that I'd like to try to find some sort of way to protest. I had actually already spoken to the city council at a meeting at the city hall, expressed my opinions, and so I wanted to protest what was upheld by the courts to be illegal police action, arresting local Christians for expressing their dissent with policies. That's what led up to my decision to protest. My dad had some stickers made that parodied my town's name and COVID motto. Soviet Moscow, enforced because we care, with a nice hammer and
That's
sickle.
Actually what they said?
Yes, they said enforced because we care, because that was on all the different posters all over town. And Soviet Moscow because, well, that's a pretty low-hanging
right
jab for a small town named Moscow that's being particularly draconian with its law enforcement and restrictions on speech. So that's really the broader context of what led me to protest. Are you there?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So that was the context for my protest, given that there was a history, particularly in our town, of the city acting, I think, in some pretty inappropriate and illegal ways to silence community members from expressing their opinions on the state of affairs in the town. And so my brother and I went out one night and put up stickers downtown. And someone called the cops on us. The police showed up. I was handcuffed, put on the ground, and then the city attorney, the prosecutor, started prosecuting me on 13 misdemeanor counts for placing a poster on a pole without permission, which had never been prosecuted before. And
right, so it was a law in Moscow and had been for a little while, but no one had ever been prosecuted for it. And there were stickers and signs all over the place. Is that true?
Yeah, it was there were a lot of stickers downtown and plenty of posters. The police, one of the policemen told my dad actually that uh, he did not agree with our messaging, that he didn't like what we had to say. And the prosecutor is on record referring to people from my church as idiots, religious nutcases, and they really were upset with some of the recent protests, and so I think they decided to try to crack down, um, and as a show of force. So yeah, like normally people will post they'd put up their yard sale signs, their lost cat posters. They'd literally have contact information on them. So it wouldn't be too hard to track down who violated this ordinance. Uh, you could literally just call the phone number. So it's I definitely did not expect them to respond the way they did. Um,
So it
I
was only the
understand why they
folks,
didn't like what I was saying.
right? But it was only the folks who compared Moscow, Idaho to Moscow, USSR, who got arrested.
Exactly. It was only when criticism on a sensitive topic was posted that they decided to go at it with full bore. That said, I don't even think that the ordinance bans what I did. It specifically says no sign, notice, or other advertising material. I think a fairly standard understanding of what advertising is some sort of commercial purpose. So I think I definitely, and mine was nothing to do with commercial purposes. I wanted to express my dissatisfaction with what the city was doing. Um,
So it's not just
so like
an issue of,
I don't even want to. I think that they were overextending an ambiguous ordinance to target someone they disagreed with politically. That's my view of what the situation was. Um, I don't want to cede the idea that I actually violated the ordinance. I think it was a pretty targeted thing. It's obviously very hard to nail that down. My broader case, I'm happy to give a shout out to my lawyers at Stone Hilton. They've done an excellent job writing up the legal arguments for this in our writ of cert to the Supreme Court. They do a better job than I would if you of laying out the exact specifics of our legal case, and that's available on the Supreme Court website where you can read the briefs. So
this went all the way through the local courts and then all the way to state courts in Iowa and I mean Idaho
Idaho.
and you got no relief. You were convicted, found guilty, and on appeal, it was all upheld. And so that's why you're at the U.S. Supreme Court today, correct?
Yeah, it's been a long journey, and we really did not. The reason why we've pursued it so far, it's been for years, is just because we really don't want this sort of precedent to stand in our state, where you can have a local municipality target people for political speech and have no reprieve. It'd just be a really terrible thing to let stand. And I don't want my hometown, I don't want Boise, any other city, to be able to do this in the future. So we felt like it was our responsibility to keep pursuing it, even though at a certain point they we went to a full jury trial in the local in the municipal court, and we had tried to get we had filed motions to dismiss to the municipal judge, and she had ruled against us, I think in some pretty inexplicable ways, several times in a row, and then prohibited us from arguing our best arguments to the jury. She basically said you're not allowed to argue that the ordinance was ambiguous and that your conduct doesn't fall under it. You're not allowed to argue that this is a violation of your First Amendment rights. You're not allowed to argue that you had tacit permission from the fact that there were other stickers and things, uh, political speech downtown. And so she narrowed our our arguments quite a lot, and so we had to wait to appeal to even bring those back up. And there are also things like the police told us there was no video, and they told us that for about a year, and then came out and said, well, actually, we do have video of the interaction, but we don't have audio. And the judge didn't do anything to reprimand the local police. And very unfortunately, our lawyer at the time failed to enter it into the record. And so we actually can't even argue on that on the basis as evidence in our appeals, because the city, as far as I'm aware, I think the police hid the evidence for the better part of a year, and so
Right.
it's been a learning experience for me to see how difficult it is to go through an appeals process and even bring forward your best evidence and arguments. That said, I'm happy to have great representation at this point, but I'm rambling at this point. But there you
Yeah.
go. There's a
No.
straight. We didn't want to let this stand. We didn't want it to be precedent in our state.
Well, I mean, you say you're rambling, but really, I mean, this is the kind of thing that a lot of people across the country have to deal with, right? And I won't compare your case to other cases, but I think we've seen lots of cases like this where, well, the process is the punishment in one sense, right? They find you
Absolutely.
guilty, and in your case, the punishment is not as severe as it is in others. Now, I think if I recall that part of your punishment is, other than having a guilty record, conviction on your record, which is not minimal, right? That's something to it. But they're also requiring you to write an essay explaining why you were wrong. Is that case? Is that right?
Yeah, that was basically what was assigned. I would have to pay a fine, receive a misdemeanor charge, and then write an essay. And it is particularly a bitter pill to swallow to have compelled speech as punishment for my free expression of my political views, which I think are were perfect. I still stand by them. I still
Right.
stand by them, and I don't want to recant. And I think the courts have stood with me in terms of the city's behavior having been illegal and how they had treated protesters. So, yeah.
No, I completely understand, and so it's, as I know, it's tough getting the Supreme Court to take an appeal. Right, there are just a limited amount of cases they have. Do you or your attorneys think there may be something in this case that might catch their attention?
Yeah, I think free speech issues are very important in the country right now. There are some similar cases that have happened elsewhere, and it's definitely, I think, raises questions that would be of interest to the court. That said, I am not the best one to describe the particulars of how it interacts with other precedents and the exact legal significance. I personally just have wanted to pursue it out of my own sense of justice and not wanting to let it
Absolutely.
stand. And I've been very pleased, as I think we tried to bring it to a number, like we floated it to see with different firms if they'd be interested, if they thought that it was a case that was worth appealing to the Supreme Court, and we got very positive responses from a number of people. And so if I trust some of these lawyers, I can see the significance just for free speech issues more generally. And it is actually of interest to the Supreme Court to not let a grave chill on free speech in a state stand. I think that's a serious enough issue that the court ought to rectify it.
Well, I wish you luck on that. I think it's a great issue that needs to be dealt with, and And as I said when we were talking before we got started here, I mean, it's great that you're standing up for justice. I mean, and in one sense, it's justice for you, but like you said, these issues are going on all over the country for a lot of different
Hmm.
people, and
Yeah,
and so something like this can help set a precedent, not just in one case in Idaho, but really across the country. So that's great.
absolutely.
So
And
I'd like to, or go ahead.
yeah, I just like to say that that's part of why, um, even though it's not always been a pleasant process, I felt like I should go through with it because plenty of people have dealt with similar things and were not in the position to continue the legal fight. And so yeah, I've seen how arduous it is, and I've given, there have been plenty of people who very generously donated to our legal fund. Um, and because of that, uh, I, yeah, I just recognize that it's very hard for a lot of people to be in the position to really stand up for their rights when they're trampled on. And it just has to fall to those who can keep the fight going to do so.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, so let's step back from this a little bit and look a little bit in the past, and because I want to see kind of how that might be affecting the present today. So I think it was your great grandfather, Jim Wilson. He was a former naval officer, and he picked up his family. So from what I've read his autobiography, by the way, Faith, Grace Upon Grace. Anybody who's watching, you ought to go read it. It's one of the top 10 books I've ever read, and so go get it. But so he talked about, he got into the bookstore business, right? But it was really
Mm-hmm.
his business was evangelism, but he just did it through bookstores. And so he decided to move to Moscow back, I think, in '71, and to open a bookstore there to take. Really, I mean, from what I remember reading, that his vision basically was to find a strategically important community that was of the right size that could that it could be taken for Christ with the forces available for the mission, right? That he could bring, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
Moscow, Idaho, it's got two universities right there within a few miles of each other, and so that was the place he picked. And it's still a work in process, obviously, if you're having to go through this, but nonetheless, I think that effort has borne great fruit in Moscow and a lot of other places through Christchurch and your grandfather's ministry and lots of other things, right? So now you're not in Moscow anymore. You've decided in one way or another to tackle the Ivy League, really. I mean, so you went to Columbia, and now you're in Yale, and so I'm just wondering how that's going for you. Moving into the Ivy League, it's a long way from Moscow, but maybe it's not so different. I don't know. How's that going for you?
It's been good. It's uh, I've been blessed with a number of great opportunities, and as you have hinted, it's definitely uh, it's definitely a big jump to go from North Idaho to Manhattan and Connecticut. It's a very different worlds. And personally, for me, I think uh, it was just a very good challenge to step out, get out of the small town I had grown up in my entire life to go and interact with people from all over the world. But also, these schools, while they're not particularly friendly to the Christian faith as they currently stand, they do have many incredible resources to be utilized. There are a lot of very impressive scholars within their respective fields, and so um, even with their even with their very significant institutional problems, I've had personally a very good experience um, with my particular studies since I've studied history. And currently, I'm doing my academic advisor, Bruce Gordon, does work in Reformation history, and he's an incredible scholar. And so it's just been a pleasure to take advantage of the resources here. Like this afternoon, I was just in a class on Jonathan Edwards, where Yale has about 95% of Jonathan Edwards' extant materials. So every class we'd go to the rare books in library, the rare books collection, and see his original stuff. And so earlier this semester, I got to see the original handwritten copy of Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God
Oh, that's great.
that, that Edwards had preached. So I will say that for their reputation in America, they have certain negative certain negatives associated with them for good reason. But in terms of why I wanted to be here, I've been having a good time.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. When I when we set this up, it made me think about William F. Buckley Jr., who came to Yale about 80 years ago. I think it's 1946 when he started there, and he wrote in his book God and Man at Yale, which kind of really was the beginning of the modern conservative movement. He believed that Yale had a responsibility to foster in students a belief in God, and then also a recognition of the merits of an economic system based on free markets. And so, as he said, as he took that message to the university, they didn't agree with him, and they felt like that basically, in the name of academic freedom, a faculty member could teach whatever he saw fit to teach, as long as he was honest and professionally competent. Right? The the view, at least from Austin, Texas, and maybe elsewhere away from there, is that maybe some of the honesty and the professional competency that was around in Buckley's days, maybe some of that's leaking out. Now, you've already pointed out there's some really good quality folks there, but do you run it across that maybe honesty isn't one of the most deeply held um,
Yeah,
ideals there
for
in the
sure.
Ivy League?
Well, I'm not going after my compliments to the resources here at Yale, Columbia, some of these other schools. I'd be lying if I said that the academic environment was healthy. It is very, people obviously are very familiar with the political climate in these schools. People self censor. You can't speak clearly on topics without, from a conservative or a Christian point of view, without getting all sorts of negative reactions. It depends on the department, to be honest. And it depends on the professor, how well they facilitate actual discourse in the classroom. And I've definitely had classes where it was really bad. Actually, for me, given that I'm also getting some of this other stuff, it actually has been part of the experience that's been healthy for me personally. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it to people like, oh, you should go to this institution, that institution. I think it depends on where somebody's at. But the fact of the matter is, a very large swath of my generation is enveloped with these ideologies. And so it's been good for me to learn how to engage with them and communicate with people. That said, it's a pretty toxic environment in a very significant percentage of the classes here. Um, and I've actually had some liberal profs who were fantastic. I disagree with them on a heck of a lot of things, but they were very good at facilitating conversation um, and open discourse. And I think I could learn a lot from those classes precisely because I know not everyone in this country agrees with me. And I need to learn how to interact with them. But that's definitely not the average professor. Um,
Yeah. Well,
so
speak.
I'm not going to sing their praises to the heavens. It's a pretty dysfunctional situation, and I think it for most people from a religious conservative background, it's not the best place to be. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Speaking of engaging with the mob out there, I guess it is. Tell us tell us a little bit about what happened before I go. I wanted you to tell us a little bit about what happened over in Columbia when you were there, and it was during the 2024 campus riots that went all over the place,
Yeah.
and you were you were in bed at ground zero, and somebody woke you up and said, "Come on out." What happened?
Yeah, so it was after midnight, and Columbia had been crazy throughout 2023, 2024. Uh, One of the things that made me most angry through that was on October 8th, where you had just the day after so many people were massacred by Hamas, the center of campus filled with people chanting from the river to the sea, using imagery supportive of Hamas, which like, at that point, there was literally nothing that could mean apart from a show of support for Hamas's actions. And that was the thing that kicked it off in the fall, and it ran through the entire year. Like, I think universities, people should be free to discuss whether like a foreign country is conducting its war justly. That's not something that I think should be off the table for people to dialogue about. Israel is not the U.S., and even if Americans should be able to speak freely on any sort of conflict. That said, it was just a completely toxic environment, and they were disrupting classes. They were defying university um, regulations, just really screwing up the entire academic experience for their fellow students. And so, obviously, culminating in their vandalism and occupation of the building. When I went out there, I just wanted to be make it clear that not everyone there supported what they were doing, and that I fundamentally disagreed with um, how they were doing, well, everything, smashing university property, disrupting the school year. They canceled the main commencement because of it, and for what? It's not like there are plenty of Israeli students at Columbia, and it's not like you could get Columbia to divest from their Google stocks because Google does business with Israel. It was completely ludicrous. And so I just was there and wanted to make it clear that this stuff was, I thought, a load of BS.
So, Rory, you were got in front of the doors at some point in time during this whole melee that was going on out there, and you and a friend were sort of blocking the doors while these protesters were trying to I think barricade them. I mean, how did you wind up there, and what happened? Was anybody coming to your aid?
Well, I showed up on the scene, and it I just was trying to see what the heck was going on at first. And I could tell that what had been the encampment in the middle of campus, which had been defying the university's orders to clear out, uh, had transitioned into an aggressive mob trying to break break into and occupy university property. They had smashed windows, all these people chanting and yelling. And my friend and I, when they started taking these steel tables to barricade the front of the building, the crowd had to part ways to get the tables through, and so we went in with the tables to prevent them from barricading the front of the building, because we thought, perhaps, at least I thought, perhaps if we prevented them from doing this, then security or police could deal with the situation faster when they showed up on the scene. That was a mistake, thinking that anyone would show up on the scene. And one of my friends had to whisk me out of there after about half an hour. They had actually dragged my other friend away. The crowd had forcibly taken him from the front of the building. But it was very much a spur of the moment thing to try to help get the situation under control. Columbia was not responsive to the situation, and did not even really check in whether I was okay for days. Even though I'd talked to news, I'd been interviewed by international news networks, but Columbia hadn't bothered to check.
Well, I'm glad you survived that okay, and I'm also glad to hear that things are going well for you. In the Ivy League at Columbia and Yale, and that's been overall a good experience for you. So I guess my last question for you would be, what kind of advice would you give to to other young Christians who either want to change the culture or just who are kind of struggling with facing a hostile culture around them?
I'd say straightforwardly just be engaged where you are. Local politics, state politics matter. They matter, and it requires that people who have strong convictions, who will stand up for their beliefs, actually participate and express what they believe, and don't let yourself be intimidated. And that means that you need to start wherever you are, whether it's in your school or if you're in college. You just need to not let people get you down, and just in good faith express what you believe, and don't let people silence you.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, Rory, thanks again for being with us here at Excellent Thought today. And God bless your efforts, and God bless your Supreme Court case. I think we would all be better off if you make it up there and set a precedent for liberty and particularly free speech in our country. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
All right. And thanks for everybody else for tuning in here to Excellent Thought.